sophist as a compliment because the original Greek sophists were among the most highly regarded scholars of
Yeah,
their
but they're
time.
also very deceptive
But
in their culture.
but
That's
I
that's
mean,
promptly why they were
they're
designed for, is
respected
to
for their
deceive their
intelligence.
culture into
But
pushing their
I
motive.
said, I think that I totally agree. The burden is on me to prove why it's a valuable life. I can do that, but to deny it's a life is just untrue.
Well, that's the thing though, is if you can't prove life, you can also deny life. So when you have conception, you don't have a heartbeat till 6 to 7 weeks. You don't have brain capacity or neurological bounces in your brain until 24 to 25 weeks. So you can't consider life by your bias. You have to use it in an
I
actual
disagree with what
logical
you said.
standpoint.
You do have brain capacity. That's why you can't compare a fetus to a brain dead person, because a brain
What do you
dead
consider a
person,
person?
well, hold on, a brain dead individual will never, ever, ever regain brain activity in the future, whereas a fetus will. Otherwise, if a brain dead person could regain
Maybe
brain
a
activity in
fetus will,
the future,
maybe.
they wouldn't be
That's the
considered
problem. Is that you're talking about like guarantees, like when you're talking about like children health, you said, well, if they are born with birth defects, they should be able to, but you can't guarantee that they're going to make it that far. So
well,
saying that they have brain capacity from the
in
start
most
is inaccurate.
cases, so if somebody dies of natural causes, of course I wouldn't hold somebody else accountable for that. So what's your point? But in most cases of pregnancy, that's
My
not.
point is that you're taking the loss here because you're only going at it on a biased morality standpoint.
That's not true at
When
all.
you go at a logical sense,
It's just miscarriage versus deliberate killing. That's why I define abortion as the deliberate
what's
termination.
considered what's the line between the two?
Between miscarriage, yeah, that's just the death. That's just, did you cause somebody's death or did you not cause somebody's death? Did you
But that can be
violate?
argumentative.
Huh?
That can still be argumentative. Like what someone considers miscarriage is
Literally the
something else
most
that someone
black.
cannot.
It's the most
We're not
black.
talking about
Did you cause
the idea.
somebody's death or did you not? Did you violate the rights or did you not? It applies to not even just abortion, but anything. Anything. Anytime you cause somebody's death, unjustly, you should absolutely be held accountable.
At what's the extent though? The way you're
At,
phrasing
at
it.
any point, ever, if you ever violate somebody's rights, you should always, always, always be held accountable.
Okay, so how, like, when do you have rights? That's the question. To have rights, you have to have reasoning and like cognitive thinking. That by law is standard. So the idea that
That's an appeal to
that
legality.
some sperm. What's the thing though? Is you can't go in morality without legality. So you're
Oh,
talking about
no,
morality
I
based,
totally
but there is no
disagree with you.
legality being
This is
talked
what we
about.
call an appeal to legality fallacy. So just because something is written into law or is legally permissible doesn't make it moral. And in fact, to even insinuate that morality is derived from legality is just totally wrong. Like, look at history, or not even history. Let's look at what current affairs in our world are happening now that are legally permissible, but we all consider wrong.
Okay, then you can't make the morality standpoint,
Oh,
because if you're making a legality standpoint that there's things in law that's wrong, there's also been things that have been put into law or need to be put in law that is right. So you can't make a morality standpoint when it comes to
no,
legality.
I agree with you. Our current legal system is definitely flawed. And legal systems across the world are definitely flawed. That's why what we do is we advocate for a more moral legal system that protects the rights of all people.
I guess the better question is, how can the your interpretation of your own morals and beliefs be put into law, because they strictly cannot.
I disagree. I don't think that there's subjective morality exists. Every single person
Because
has
you have
rights.
to remember
Every
that
single
the entire
person. I mean, if you
different.
accept that, do you think that every single person has rights?
Again, the argument of person, what equals a
Okay,
person?
perfect.
So
Yeah.
you're trying to
So
talk
the
me in
question
circles, but you're
isn't
not gonna be
the
able to.
question isn't is do people have rights and are protecting rights moral? The question is the fetus a person? So if you'd like to get into that, we definitely can. But we both agree that everyone has the right to not be killed
If they are a person,
if they're a
because
person. So
that's
what
legal.
what
You're going
constitutes?
at a legal standpoint and then trying to add morality,
I don't even care about
because you're saying they have the right not to
I
be murdered. Murder is a legality term,
I
not
would
a
never
morality term.
I would never use it legal systems as a framework because obviously I disagree with the legal system that is pro-choice.
What's the thing though? Is then you can't say that
No,
fetuses don't have the
you
right to be
do you
murdered if
think
you're not
that
going at a
morality
legality
do you think that morality comes from laws?
Do you think ethics and moralities comes
I
from like
asked you a
bias
question.
on
Do you
one
think
specific
morality comes
individual
from
or cultural sound.
Do you think morality comes from laws?
From listening to you, you've tried to talk everybody into a corner by switching
It's
and
either
deceiving
objective
the conversation.
morality exists or subjective morality exists. Unfortunately, there's no in between. Either something is
Exactly.
moral or it's immoral.
Exactly. There is no in between. So you cannot
Agreed.
you can't tell me something's right or wrong just because you believe it is.
Well,
I'm talking about
let's get into it.
a
What
factual.
is a person to you? What is a person to you?
What is a person to you? You obviously have a way different
What,
interpretation.
I
If
asked
we
you first
completely
because
skip the morality law and just we skip the morality and the ethics,
no,
go into
because you and
straight
I
factual arguments,
you and I
you have
both
to.
agree that every single person has rights. I mean, unless you want to disagree with me, then I can justify.
Every single person. Take
Yes,
the
every
person.
single person
If
has
we're
the
gonna go morality, tell me what a person actually like quantifies.
exactly. So now we're going to disagree on what constitutes
Therefore,
a person.
Therefore, you can't continue with the moral or ethics law because you
Okay,
can't
so
tell me
let's
what.
talk about what constitutes a person then. What is a person to you? When does somebody deserve rights?
By law or ethics. That's the problem. Is we can't keep having an
So wait,
ethics
you
law
think
because our
that
ethics
people
are,
deserve rights by law or ethics?
so the basics of law normally is that when you talk about morals and ethics, every single
Hmm.
culture has different morals or ethics. We can't quantify our own morals, especially if we have no religion, on people that do have religion, because there is a thing as freedom of religion. Therefore,
Yeah, I'm
there's
not
no
religious. I
possible
don't
way
have any
to
religious
be
prescription.
pro-choice or pro-life if it in turns affects somebody's freedom of religion. Therefore, you can't keep using a morality or ethics
Okay,
term
somebody could have a religion
based
that's
on the idea they have religion.
pro-life, whatever. I don't have any religious prescriptions on it. Now the
Exactly.
question
So you can't be
when
ethic
I
or
say
morality
when I'm
because
talking,
morality.
I think that you have a different conception of morality. When I think about things that are moral, I'm talking about people's rights, right? I mean, I think protecting
You
people's
can't
rights is
talk about people's
moral.
rights. That's legal. That's legal. Like the legal
No,
allegation.
that's not. I can give you my definition of rights. Hold on, the one that I
Your
use in
definition and the law
morality.
definition are two entirely different things. You
Yeah,
cannot say
I'm not using a legal definition if that's what you're confused
again. You're
about.
using ethic or morals, and
So
that's argument.
okay, so then let's talk about it. What constitutes a person to you?
What constitutes a person to you? Because what you have to do
I answered the
is you get
question.
an answer, you fabricate your answer based off your own ethics and morals, not culturally sound biases,
Well,
and then try to push it
you asked me.
as
You asked. It's supposed to be. Even by your logic, you said Sanvi. What
no.
constitutes a
My logic is whether you agree with or don't agree, law is law, law is sound. Yes, laws change every single day,
law
but
is not
you cannot determine
law is
the
not sound.
appropriation by your own bias.
Law is not sound. That's
Like I
literally
said, it changes every single day, but you cannot appropriate your own bias into law without going through the proper channels.
what proper channels
Therefore, immediately telling everybody that
moral.
they're wrong is not
You never
sound.
go through proper channels to make moral judgments. If you think that the law is sound, that's already a contradiction because the law literally can be this
And
way
that's
or this
exactly
way.
what I didn't.
Wait, hold
What did I say?
depending on what part of the world that we're in. Like literally in America, we could have abortion rights protected up until
Abortion rights are protected up to a certain point. Guess what? That is legal. Correct or not correct? Roe versus
yeah,
Wade
yes, in
made
America.
a yeah. So we're
Yes.
talking about look. You can't bring legal into ethics and moral because when you talk about a court system and what is
I
murder and isn't murder, we don't talk about morality or ethics. We talk about facts that lead into the decisions that are being made. Law isn't
okay. So,
always fact. Law
yeah,
is
law is
changed,
not
but
sound
you
because
can't biasly
it's
change your law into culture.
it's literally variable per country. If I walk 10 feet and cross the border from America to Mexico, the law is going to change. The law is going to change in regards to abortion. And it's not any different. Like
Which means what?
there's no difference
Which means
between
what? If
people.
law is changing when you move, it
Hold on,
means
hold
what?
on. Hold on. There's no difference between peoples. The only difference is, people had a different misconception. That's literally it.
And
Now,
that's cultural based,
what
yes?
we're going to
If
need to
people
discuss if what we're going to need to discuss is it a person and is it a person deserving of rights, is the fetus a person? That is the question, because you and I both agree, Grayson, that every single person deserves the right to not be killed unjustly. Now what we're going to disagree on is if the fetus is a person or not. So what constitutes a person to you?
Again, you cannot base an argument off the idea that people quantify what was a person and is a person, because it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is abortion not being like being murder and not being like being abolished. That is impossible when you think of the lawful case scenarios. So your
Wait,
morality and
wait.
your
Well, answer the
ethics,
question. What's a person to you?
that's it's subjective. I can't
Okay,
answer something that's
perfect to
completely.
you. So you subjective person. What is a person to you?
In my opinion, it's based off science. A person's not a person until it has certain requirements met.
What are those requirements?
They have to have brain function to be alive. That is scientifically based.
Okay,
That is
so
where my
that
decision is based.
in order to be considered a person, you need to have the current capacity for brain activity, correct?
Yes, by scientific
Okay,
standards.
cool, cool. Yeah, so the reason that I would disagree with this, I understand where you're coming from, but the way that brain dead people work versus, fetuses is that brain dead people have no capacity to regain brain activity, which is why we don't place value on them and consider them dead. On the other hand, a fetus does have capacity to gain brain activity. So hypothetically, if a brain dead person could regain brain activity, I would still consider them valuable and deserving of rights. Wouldn't you?
You couldn't hypothetically say that because there's no guarantee
Well,
that embryo is going to make it to full term to have the brain capacity. So saying there's a potential for brain capacity
wait,
is
capacity
arguing that there's a
develop at
maybe
capacity
chance.
doesn't develop brain capacity doesn't develop at term anyway. So what would be the point of full term?
Well, that's what I'm saying though. It's not illegal to take someone off life support because there is no brain capacity by law, by science standards. Therefore, you
Totally
can't
agree. I
quantify the
100,000%.
idea that
I
a
totally agree with you.
baby
You
is
know why?
automatically
You
alive
want to
because
know
there's no
why?
brain.
Because said brain dead person that's on life support is unfortunately never, ever, 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 ever going to regain any type of cognitive function. On the case of a fetus will. Now you can
You
say
can't
there's no
guarantee that.
guarantee, but in most cases, wait, actually, if we could guarantee it, would you still be pro-choice?
There's no possible way to guarantee it. And
Actually,
also, I'm still
if a
pro-choice in the
doctor
fact
if a
that I
doctor can
can't
say
tell people what they
this is a
do body.
healthy pregnancy, this is a viable pregnancy, I just did an ultrasound and I can see brain activity, I can see healthy development, your point falls apart.
No, because it's still you still run into the lawful thing of privacy laws. Like there's
Well,
still
now you're
laws in
invoking the
turn.
14th Amendment. I mean, now you're shifting the goalpost. So yeah, we can talk about
Well,
the
that's the
14th.
thing though. You can't just look at one side of the goalpost and be like, "Oh, that looks cool."
Well, you
You have to
shift it.
realize
If you want to shift
full
it,
abundance of
let's
that
talk about
goalpost.
it. So the 14th Amendment, the rights is what Roe v. Wade was, passed upon essentially. It was protected under the right to privacy. I would reject the fact that, you have some sort of private right to kill another person unjustly.
Well, actually, it's protected by the Fifth, Fourth, Fifth, 15th, and the 19th Amendment. But no one has a right to your body. We've decided that in like SA cases. We've decided that in abuse cases, no one has a right to your body. Therefore, you cannot say that just because you want to have an abortion, that automatically has a right to your body, and
I
that is
definitely
law.
compare, the fetus using your body to SA, but in the case of it's not necessarily, using your body. What we're asking is that you not kill them. Just because somebody is using your body, you may have the right to detach, but you do not have the right to kill that person. And unfortunately, abortion is not detachment, it is killing.
But you can't be killing something that's not actually alive yet. That's the problem.
Okay, so then
Is that if
we're
you
gonna
can't
circle
go
back
at
to
reality at this point.
so
The
we're
problem
gonna to
is that
person.
everything that you're doing is based on your own beliefs and
Wait, hold on.
opinions and not fact.
You see how you shifted the
Like,
goalpost? Because originally we were talking about personhood, right? Then we moved on to privacy, and then you shifted it back to autonomy. But then we always have to get back to personhood because that's the main question: is it a person? So I want to finish the brain activity part. I gave you an example and you shifted it. So do you want to talk about that then?
repeat what you said.
Yeah, what I had said was, you're saying to me, Sanvi, well, you're defining the beginning of life differently than the end. And I'm saying, well, sure, because it's not analogous to pregnancy. Brain dead people, unfortunately, never, ever, ever regain cognitive function. In the case of fetus, they will regain cognitive function in the future.
Maybe. It's still biased. You can't say they will because there's no guarantee
Hold
on
on.
any of it. at all. Like when you think about infant
I'm
mortality
pretty
rates,
confident.
especially
I'm
mothers,
pretty
5 out
confident
of
it's
1,000
a
die.
over 90%, but I will fact check this in case I'm wrong. Hold on.
Like 700 mothers per year die giving birth, and that's based on the CDC guidelines, not based on the coronavirus right now.
No,
Like,
yeah. The maternal mortality rate is less than 0.5%, bro. Yeah.
okay, you can't just say half, like, oh, based off 0.5%. How big is our population and divide that
Well, yeah.
by,
So, yeah,
and it's a larger number than a percentage.
we have to look at it by rate because population is relative, like you said. So in America, the maternal mortality rate, which is what the CDC measures, the rate is 0.00, I think it was 24 maternal mortality rate, deaths during childbirth from the mother.
Based off the population of what? You can't throw a percentage and say that this is equal.
The way that percentage, the way that this was calculated in the CDC, at least, it took all live births and then it took mothers who died during live births and then we divided them.
Okay, what's the big number? Give me the big number and then we'll talk about it. Because you can't give me a percentage and be like 0.025 out of an amount and then call it a small amount. Because 5% of the world, let's just take 5%. It's a very big part of the population. You can't just give me a small number that makes it sound like it's not quantifiable and then just be like, well, this little amount, so it doesn't matter. No, it does.
I didn't give you a small number. I gave you a small percentage, which is true. It's a factually proven percentage, is that it's less than 0.5%.
Based off now, what is this case study?
So
what is the case?
Obviously, every single case is variable. So in the case, in the normal case where you have a 99.9% chance of survival, by the way, this is more of a chance of survival than walking outside is in some cases. You have more of a chance of survival than walking down the street. And that somehow remains a justification for termination?
Literally, you said that, like, case study, like, well, it's if you're saying that every case study is different, then you can't use a number as a valuable argument.
You brought up the CDC. I was just correcting your statistic. You brought it up, not me. You said, Sandy, this is the maternal mortality rate.
You tell me what your statistic was based off of.
You brought it up, bro. I just gave you the
my
correct
statistic
numbers.
was I told you exactly how many per. It is literally 5.56 per thousand. Per thousand. You told me a percentage number.
Yes, it's also 17 point something per 100,000. So there's different metrics. Yes, and I put it in a percent. What I did for you was I converted it. What I did for you and for the audience was I converted it into a percentage form, is what most people are used to. Percentages out of 100. So I converted that 1,000 into 100, and that is a less than 0.5% out of 100 chance of death.
We can't look at it as a percent if it involves human life. Yes or no?
Well, you just looked at it as a percent. You just looked at it as a rate because you just said
per
1,000.
I'm not arguing that human life.
That's just a percent out of 1,000, though, not 100.
What's the thing, though, is I'm not arguing that's conceived at conception. You are.
Well, you still are using it. You're still using your own standard. You said Sanbi. You can't use
that's
percentage. You can't use percentages. You just used a percentage. You just used it in a different format.
Oh my God, you're cracking me up. You can't use it as an argument for your morality base when you are saying that
I never did.
It's conceived.
You brought it up. I just corrected
you. Are though. Listen, you can't use it in your
argument
because you're saying that conception happens and that life is then, right? That's exactly what you're saying.
Well, yes, life begins.
Therefore, any of those statistics are wrong because it doesn't actually have the number of how many are conceived. So for you to use it in your argument, it has to be able to fit your bias standards. So it would have to talk about
I never even used it. You used it per 1,000, and I converted it to a percentage. I never even brought up the CDC. You brought up the CDC. I just happened to know the statistic too.
After you tried to twist it for your own argument, it has to make sense.
No, I never meant. Wait, can we replay it? I never mentioned the CDC before you did.
No, so what I'm saying though is whatever I'm saying, you're twisting to try to use for your argument.
I'm correcting it because you had the stat. I was putting the stat in terms of 100. So yeah.
What's the thing though? When you're doing an essay,
but regardless, I'd like to move on to at least brain activity so we can finish the personhood point.
because it doesn't make sense for your point. Is that it?
Well, yeah, we can. You said the statistic. I corrected your statistic and put it in terms of 100.
You did.
But again, we're never going to fundamentally agree on abortion if we don't agree that the fetus is deserving of rights. So, can we talk about personhood if you'd like?
That's again an ethics and moral situation. I want to talk about something that's
okay,
not involved.
So your subjective standard for personhood is
I am dead. You're
brain
talking
activity.
You are
because
talking
you think
yourself.
that it's consistent with the position of brain death, right?
So let's get this straight. Your argument is ethics and moral based, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Therefore, there is no way for us to be able to talk about this that's going to make any sense because you're running around the ethics and moral category, which is a very large and vast way to try to explain something, especially considering it's culturally different. I'm talking about specific statistics, laws, things that are sound across the board when it comes to United States.
Again, like I said, that just remains an appeal to legality. If you look to the law for morality, by definition,
well, you're appealing morality. Like we're appealing.
No, I didn't appeal to morality because I didn't. Wait, hold on. What moral system? What moral system did I mention?
Your own moral system. What is your moral system based off of? Like, what is
an appeal to morality is when you take a certain framework. Like, for example, let's look at virtue ethics. If I took that framework and I applied everything that wasn't related to it to that, I never even mentioned a moral system. So how can it be an appeal to morality?
That's all you're talking about is a moral system. So what is the moral ladder for you?
What moral system did I mention?
Because you're talking about how it's not. You were talking about in previous slides that was
what I mentioned specifically was that people have rights. That's it. You and I agree. People have rights. People have the right to not be unjustly killed. You and rights. I agree. What we disagree on is the fetus a person deserving of the same protection? So I would like to talk about if the fetus is a person.
Based off what? Are we talking about law, science, or morality?
No, we're going to talk about just in general. Do you think that the fetus is a person? Your opinion, I guess.
Science-based, it is factually that they are not. Are we talking about morality or science?
So now I'm going to test your standard then. If a brain dead person, like we mentioned before, was to
We've already talked about this. Do you have anything else that's not
you the same didn't answer it. If they were to somehow be able to
you can't guarantee life. Therefore, you cannot use that argument because you cannot guarantee me life. There is a possibility.
Well, no, like I said, if a doctor, which is true, if a doctor could guarantee a perfectly viable, perfectly developing pregnancy and could detect brain activity, how in the world is that not a guarantee if it's detectable scientifically?
Okay, so if you're basing it on that, we also have to base it off
health. Great. If it's detectable, if the doctor knows that they will detect it, how would that not be based off of science?
That's the thing, though. Can they, for fact, scientific fact, or medical fact, actually tell me before they're born if they are actually alive? The answer is no.
Okay, so now you just shifted it again. Because you just said before they are born, which is different from brain activity. Brain activity would develop before they're born, so you just changed it.
No, you're changing it. So brain activity, what you're arguing is that
before I thought it was conception from the beginning.
Listen, you're arguing before brain activity that they're alive. Scientifically, they have to have brain activity to be alive. So we can't argue at sperm or fetus or embryo because it's not factually sound. It's morally
that's actually not true. What you're saying is that they have personhood at this point. Cellular life is a thing, right? Cells are alive. That's not scientifically disputable. You would agree with that. Now, what you're arguing is personhood. Now, is it a person before brain activity? And I'm testing that standard by asking you about a brain dead person.
You are not giving any science or medical based anything, and you're just basing it off twisted opinions on morality.
What do you want me to tell you about how life begins at conception? I totally could.
Because in conception, cells die. That's the whole point. They die and they grow. So, and there's three ways that you can kind of tell if there's going to be problems. The only problem is that they're not accurate. You can't accurately tell me something is going to be alive.
That's the, like, what I'm telling you
Because
is
where
not
we're at in
true.
the
That's
medical
not
field,
true.
we're not able
Even like
to.
even scientifically, like I've taken classes where you can literally witness the process of cell division under a microscope and be able to say yes, these cells are alive because dead cells cannot divide. So absolutely you can witness that.
You are seriously cracking me the fuck up. You are not making any
For what
scientific
reason?
or
You just
law
said,
based
zombie,
stuff.
you can't
You're
witness
just running
life.
in a
Yes, you
circle.
can.
Let's just lawfully go. We'll talk about let's talk about medical, all right? Well, you want to talk about medical, so let's talk about medical. What is considered alive medically? I'll wait.
What did, if we're going to say that, cellular life is a thing, sure. What you're saying was, what is a person medically is at 24 weeks.
Exactly. So therefore
Yes,
they cannot
this
be
is what we
alive
call
before.
an appeal to legality, because in some countries it's 12 weeks, in some countries it's 6, in some countries it's 48.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Where do you live?
So
What country?
unless you're saying
What
that your standard shifts on what part of planet Earth you're on, that makes no
what
sense.
country do
Because
you live
a
in?
24-year-old weak fetus in one country shouldn't have less or more rights than another. It should always be consistent.
Again, that's legal law, yes.
Yes. So
Therefore, you can't
perfect.
morality base
You just said my point. If
anything.
it varies on what part of the globe you set your foot on, then you do not have a consistent standard. I'm sorry. You have a
Well, it's
standard that's
culture.
based in legality,
You
but you don't have a consistent standard.
you do realize that culture also changes where you stand, right?
That you did not address my point. You do not have a consistent
That
standard
does. Therefore,
if where you set foot on planet Earth determines your rights. You don't have a consistent standard for rights.
and
I
if your
say
morality
rights
depends on
always
where
begin at
you're
conception. You're appealing to legality. Rights could begin at 6 weeks. They could begin at 12. They could begin at 48. They could begin at birth. You're saying that it depends on where you are. I'm disagreeing.
so does morality. Morality depends on where you are.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. In countries where the culture allows for domestic violence to be legal, is that moral?
See, this is where we get into the conversation about
Exactly. It's not. It's not. And you're not going to concede that because that's terrible. In countries, just because culture or societal or religious or whatever norms allow for terrible things to be legal doesn't make them right.
okay. So what country do we live in though? Like what country
I
do
mean,
you live in?
I live in America. I don't know where you
So
live,
do I.
but okay,
So you
great.
can't take other countries' laws and or cultural standpoints and our wars and place it in America. We're talking about specifically
And then here you go.
Americans
This is called
to
disingenuousness because you
abolishing
said
abortion.
you don't care about having a consistent standard. You said that it determines based on legality, and I'm telling you,
Exactly.
legality,
But where are we?
forget anything. You know, the legality about abortion varies per state too, right? State within the United States. In Texas, we consider a fetus a person at 6 weeks. In Oklahoma, we consider it closer to 12 weeks. In like California, it's at 24. So what's your point here?
Again, that's law based.
And it's in America, is it not? So is it not variable within our own country?
Even so, you're saying that in Texas it's as little as 6 weeks. Therefore, you can't tell me that's at conception. Where in America
No,
is it at
because
conception?
you know why? Because I can disagree with the law. And I do. I
Exactly.
disagree
So
with the
it's right
law.
based.
Do you not
That
disagree with the law? Everybody disagrees with the law at some point.
exactly that is our own morality base.
Okay, yes. So we
So
are
you can't
allowed to
talk
disagree
about
with current
morality when it comes
legal
to
dispositions that
law.
exist.
You're shooting yourself in your own foot. Like you
No,
can't
you
talk
are,
about
because you just said, zombie, what country do we live in? You
law.
can't apply it. And I'm telling you, within our own country,
You can't
there
apply.
is
It has
so
nothing. It has no
there's
bias.
so
Like
much
it has no base.
variability.
To what we're
There's so
talking
much
about right there.
variability. Because you're like, I gave you other examples and you didn't want them. And then you're like, zombie, what country do we live in? America. Okay.
Also,
And
the
then
thing
in
is, you
America
can't base.
we have all of this variability legally. That's why we should
You can't.
never, ever, ever look to the law to to justify our opinions, because that's an appeal to legality fallacy.
Well, that's the problem though. Is you can't base societal aspects that are not going on. So you can't
There are.
use.
That's what I'm saying. You just said the culture in Texas may be different from the culture in California, which is why in Texas, we recognize the fetus as a person
I
at
never
6
said the
weeks,
culture
and
in
in
Texas.
California, the culture might be different to where we recognize it at 24 weeks. These are two different standards. It is not consistent, even though it's under the same country.
I never once said the cultural in Texas. You just said
Well,
that
no,
yourself.
I'm applying your standard.
I
You're
said
like,
the
zombie, the
culture.
culture is
You're
different,
applying
and I'm
something.
like, I
So you
totally
can't say
agree. conservative religious culture is different from liberal culture. I'm agreeing with you. Now, with that differentiation in culture comes a differentiation in moral standards. 6-week fetus is a person versus 24-week fetus is a person. So now explain to me why your morals are contingent upon what part of the country you're in.
It has nothing to do with what part of the country you're in. Your morals is your morals. It's
Then you
what
just
part.
asked me. You just asked me why you
Where
asked me
you're at
where
in
I
the.
live in America.
What's the thing though is that you have to pass laws. So your morality can't be dependent on where you're at. Like that conversation can't be happening because it depends on who's passing the laws. Because whether you agree with or don't agree with the law or not, it is like that's factual as far as when it goes Roe versus Wade. When
No,
it comes to like
laws
about
are
the sick,
not factual. They're inconsistent, and I just gave you an
they
example.
are,
They
but you
are
can't like
inconsistent.
you can't go to a you can't get in trouble by the law. Go in and be like, so morality. I don't think like me murdering that people is okay, but like, could we do that anyway? Like, that's not how that works.
I agree. That's why we should never look to the law for morality.
Yeah, but you can't use morality as a basis for an argument when you can like. It's like for instance,
Wait, hold
you
on.
brought up
If abortion is wrong or right is a moral question. You know that, right? It's a moral question.
again. We're getting into moral questions. You have not given me.
Right. It is a moral question. So we can debate
No.
what is moral and what is immoral. But you're looking to legality, which is wrong. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, you can't tell me I'm wrong based on your own morals.
No, I'm not telling you based on your own morals. I'm telling you based on
Based off
your
what
own
then?
standard. Your own
Off
standard.
what?
You said you base off your abortion position, and I quote you. You said you base off your abortion position on legality, and then I gave you an example of like countries where domestic abuse was legal, and you said no, America.
No,
And I'm like, okay, let's look at America. In America, there's so much variability. Now what?
if you're gonna quote me, make sure you quote me right. I actually said that it was based on scientific and law based. So
Oh,
the
excuse me,
fact that
scientific and law based.
there was
Now that I've already addressed the
you've not
scientific part.
debunked law.
Now that
You
I've
still
debunked the law part, do you want to get back
you
into
have
that? Because I
how
already addressed that.
how have you? You think
Because
you have
your standard is very okay. Well, you concede
so
that if you look to the law for what is considered moral, that it is inconsistent. Will you concede that?
moral is consistent, law is inconsistent. Therefore, you can't tell me it's debunked.
Okay, cool.
If both
Okay,
are
just say yes. Yes, if you look to
I
the
don't have
law
to
for your
because
if you
you're
look to
wrong.
the law for your morality, it's
Like, you can't
inconsistent.
gaslight.
Obviously, because people legislate conflicting laws all the time, and we see this in America. Now, moving back to like my moral standpoint, or maybe even your personal morals,
Your moral standpoint.
we can believe in things that don't contradict anything. I can 100% believe life begins at conception, and this would not contradict a single other principle I believe. But if we look to law, yes, that would contradict each other.
Therefore, you can't use morality as a based argument on, especially if you think
why? Because
abortion.
mine exists without contradiction, but legality does exist with contradiction.
Yeah, but you can't judge just on morality. You have to cover the whole basis. Because when I was talking about morality, it's based by person to person. There is no sound way of saying what like counts as morality or ethics. It is based person by person.
So now you're shifting the goalpost. So before you said you derive your position from science and law, now we're saying that everyone has their own individual.
Well, I'm arguing
standard.
your fact. That's what you are saying. Is that it's
I said there's objective morality. You're saying it's subjective. So clearly that's not what I'm saying.
Is it or is not your morality?
Obviously, it's not subjective. I just said it was objective.
So is that not how you feel moral standpoint based?
Objectively true. Yes, it is.
Okay, then you therefore cannot place your argument on a moral standpoint because morals are different. That's why
so now
whatever I
do
feel
you
morality
understand
based.
This is where we're differing. You just said morals are subjective. I just said my morals are objective.
Exactly. Therefore, you can't use an argument for a whole population.
So
that's
now
why I'm not talking about what I believe morality.
What we're going to disagree on is, are there objective moral truths? Yes or no? That's what we're going to disagree on. I think that there are. People are deserving of rights, specifically the right to not be killed.
But
and that is an objective moral truth.
Again, we're going in circles. What is a person then?
Okay, you know why we're going in circles, bro? Because this is what happened. You went from person to bodily autonomy to 14th Amendment to law.
Everything has to do with what you're talking about.
And then we get right back to personhood. You know why? Because this is a question of personhood. So let's talk about it. Why does a person... to you begin
So what
at, why does a
are you
person
not
to you
understanding
begin at
that
24 weeks?
the idea of a person you're basing on morality, and I'm basing it on medical and law. So there's two obviously different arguments going on.
Yes,
You
and
can't
one is contradictory, by the way.
not be expecting for me to say, well, what is a person?
One is contradictory. One of your standards is contradictory because, like I just
You are
mentioned, you are
no,
100%. I said life is conception. Life begins. I never changed that at one point during the slide. You have, you know why? Because you said you base your 24-week mark off of science and law actually says that it can begin at 6 weeks.
No,
it can begin at birth. It can begin at 12 weeks. So
and
you
then law
have been inconsistent. That's simple.
No, you're twisting my words again, and this is where
Oh my
sophist
gosh.
comes.
Okay, literally, let's
Oh
just go
my
into
God.
let's just go into syllogism. Do you base your 24-week mark off of science and laws?
It depends on if we're talking about law. Depends on if we're talking about science.
Do
Which
you
part?
base your standard of rights beginning at brain activity based off science and laws?
Are we talking about science or are we talking about law?
You said both, so I'm using both.
Because I stick with what I can prove.
Do you base it off of science and laws?
Yes, they're very different.
Okay,
Both have
cool.
different.
Okay, yes. Because
Okay, cool.
you said both. You didn't say one or the other. You said both. Okay. Second of all, do laws contradict each other?
They do, but you can't morality base.
Wait, hold on. Forget laws. Does the medical standard for that contradict each other?
Does the morality standpoint not contradict each other?
No. Let me finish my syllogism, and I will ask you. You can ask me a million questions. Does the medical standard of life contradict each other?
Technically,
I'm waiting.
I said technically. There's a probability, a possibility.
Yes. So now we've established you base it off of laws and science. Laws contradict each other. Scientific conceptions contradict each other. So why is it that your position does not contradict each other?
So morality is also opinion based.
You were just switching the goalposts, bro.
Your whole argument.
Let me finish with your argument, and you can ask me 5 million questions. Just let me finish. So we just established, right? You base it off of science and law. We agreed. Law disagrees with each other. Science consensus disagrees with each other. Now, here, how in the world are you going to say that your position isn't a contradiction?
And see, that's the problem. Is though you're trying to twist it. How is yours not a contradiction?
How did I twist it? You said yes. You said technically yes.
So was yours.
Okay, so now you're again. I will answer every question you want to ask about my position, but until you concede that yours is contradictory, we can't move on because that's bad faith.
Is yours yes or no?
That's bad faith. That's literally being bad faith. Like I asked you a very clear question, and you seem smart enough to know that logically, when you say yes, this can contradict, yes, this can contradict, your position can be contradictory. Yes or no?
What's the thing though? Is you can't use it as an argument if yours yourself does the exact same thing.
Okay, and I will demonstrate to you my position once you concede yours.
There's no position. We can't talk about it if it already contradicts each other.
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yes or no, does your position contradict itself?
Yes or no for you?
I just asked you. Did I, Chantel, tell me if I'm wrong. Did I go down the line of questioning first?
Both can be based on that fact.
Okay, great. You can ask me as many questions as you want once you answer mine. Does your position contradict itself?
Does your position contradict itself?
Bro, can you take this person? I'm done.
We can't have a conversation if it's biased on your side as well.
Like I said, if you had asked the question first, I would have answered it, but I asked it, so go ahead.
You're being extremely...
No, this is what we call being bad faith, literally. Because, I mean, if you want to say yes and then press me for 10, 15 more minutes, I'll be happy to do that. But until you concede this point, it's bad faith. So...
All right, we'll say yes.
Yes, your position's contradictory?
We'll say yes, because both is.
Okay, cool. Yes. Now, feel free to ask me any questions now.
Okay, how is yours not?
Well, the burden's on you to show that it is.
Exactly. So you don't even have an argument based on...
Just like how I showed it for you via demonstrating laws and scientific consensus.
Therefore, you're looking like a clown because you can't use that argument. If it's on both sides, you have to argue yours to a T. You can't just try to back somebody.
Here's what we call a burden of proof.
and call it a win.
Make an argument against my position, and I will refute it. You just haven't made an argument. You're like, how is yours
Neither
good
of you.
without
You've
demonstrating
not
how mine is
debunked a
bad?
single thing. You've not debunked a single thing. Therefore, you can't
Your
say that
position was contradictory, so I think I did pretty decent.
So is yours.
But
so is yours. Your position is contradictory.
Give me an example.
Because it's your opinion. Morality is opinion-based.
Tell me how.
You thinking that...
Tell me how. What am I contradicting? What are the two confounding contradictory theories?
And that is life. That is your opinion. It is contrary. It's contradictory based.
Say that again. Say that again.
We're running in circles because you have. You don't have the.
Say that again because I'm going to dispute that last statement. Say that again.
That you believe that conception is where life starts?
Yeah, not even life. Just it's a fact that a new organism begins at conception. That is a biological fact.
But it's not scientific fact when we're talking about life.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When the sperm fertilizes the egg, a new set of DNA is formed instantaneously, mind you. When scientists disagree on where life begins, what they're saying is that at that point at fertilization technically hasn't implanted and undergone division. That's what they're talking about. There's no dispute that fertilization is a new human life. That's not a dispute.
You can't use that argument because your cells on your own body dies every single day. So if we're going to use that argument, you're killing somebody every single day.
Well, that is the argument. First of all, there's a difference between them naturally dying and you doing to kill somebody. And second of all, the necessary components, this is biologically untrue. In order for a person to form is a sperm cell from the father and an egg cell from the mother. These are the necessary conditions for a new human to form. Now, without these things, a human cannot form. It doesn't have to form. It doesn't have to form in the womb. It can form in a petri dish for IVF at any point. But these are the necessary conditions we need. Now, when you're talking about like skin cells, hair cells, that is not a fertilized egg. So what is your point?
So you do realize that can't be used as an argument, considering women can have children together now, right? So therefore, you can't say man equal.
I just said, IVF. It doesn't have to be in the womb, but the necessary condition. It can be an artificial sperm cell. I'm not disagreeing with that, but those are the necessary conditions.
So I'm really confused about your argument.
Well, I guess the only other way I can explain it, just like how the only way we can, make water is H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. These are the necessary conditions.
Based off of...
For something to be regarded as a water molecule, it has to have, 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen.
Yes, but then you can't use your argument that once somebody that is brain dead isn't technically alive because they're still producing live cells.
No, they're not. The only way, brain dead people do not.
To be considered brain dead, you don't have to have full brain.
Brain dead people do not undergo cell division, right? That's the point, is when your brain stops functioning, that's the control center of your body. Now, what we can have is life support, attempting to keep blood pumping through the body, but cells will not divide and, develop or reproduce on their own at that point. No, they won't.
Okay. Then what's considered brain dead? What is the basis of brain dead?
Well, what we consider brain dead medically is just loss of cognitive function.
Okay, so if they're losing cognitive function, technically, they're still having neurological pathways throughout their body. Just because someone doesn't have, so if they don't have the thinking capabilities, that means that they're still alive. Just because they can't think.
Like I said, your cells will not undergo the process of division and the necessary conditions for life once you are brain dead.
They're still alive.
No, they're not. What we attempt to do is try to keep the heart beating, but none of this can happen, once the brain activity is gone, unfortunately. So
you're saying heart doesn't equal being alive, correct?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay, then the fetus isn't alive until about 24, 25, 26 weeks.
Hold on, I just said it. I said it begins at conception, not 6 weeks. This is a shaman. I said that life begins at conception maybe 20 times in this life.
No, but
and then I said it doesn't begin at a heartbeat at 6 weeks. It begins at conception. And then for some reason this gets twisted into 24. How?
How can How can it be alive if you just said that brain dead's not alive?
Like
Because
like I just explained, the reason that brain dead, because you can look this up by the way, the medical definition of brain death is that you will not ever regain cognitive function. You lose it for 0.01 of a second, you'll never regain it. In the case of a fetus will gain brain activity in the future. It is, heck, let's just say not
maybe.
For sure, right? Let's say not for sure. Yeah, sure, I'll agree with that. Not for sure. It is a possibility here. It is not a possibility here, ever.
But
you cannot regain brain activity. And if you could, we wouldn't consider them dead. We would consider them something like unconscious, because it is impossible to come back from the dead.
You can't argue something's alive when it's not. You just said that if you're brain dead, you're not alive.
I feel like I've exhausted myself, Chantel. So
you can't argue that they're not alive.
Yeah.
I think I exhausted myself, because I don't know. There's no other way I can explain it. Like brain death. If you lose cognitive function for half a second, you'll never regain it. You have no possibility to regain it. No matter what we do, we cannot currently give you back brain activity. In the case of fetus, there is a possibility, I will accept that you can regain brain activity.
They left.
And that's just a fact. Oh, did he leave? Bro, or you kicked him?
Yeah.
I think it was so
I did.
long.
No, I actually didn't. But, oh man.